these advertisers look for or look at when they choose their media mix and the agency that they might want to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you look at marketing, it's so important today, and the media investment is a huge part of the marketing budget. So to really define effectiveness, you have to, as you mentioned, Louis, talk about the targets. What are the objectives? I mean, a media budget without an objective is a cost. A media budget with an objective, that's an investment. So that's really the starting point, and ensure that you then can, from the overall objectives, lifetime value of a client, or driving traffic, or creating awareness, or brand attitudes, that then needs to be connected to more tactical KPIs and objectives. So that's often the way we analyze spend, to ensure that there's not silos between the overall objective that you want to achieve and the money spent. So that every step of the journey you have certain KPIs and track it over time.
Yes. And I'll turn to you, Benji. So you are on the media agency side. How often do you get the question asked from prospects or current clients to drive effectiveness or efficiency when you work for them?
I think some part which is really sometimes over-missed is so I really like what Michael was saying, but there's also another part to it, is the recall of the ad. So we sometimes spend so much time trying to figure out where we're going to place the ad and all the data that's around it. But if you actually had to speak to someone after they saw the ad, do they even know what the ad's about? What was the message that came across? And this is where we are spending a lot of our time and actually doing ad recall surveys, so actually re-asking the people, did that ad make you feel this? Did that ad make you want to purchase this? Because the brand message and the tone of voice and the creative at the beginning, I think, is very important. Because sometimes, we come up with these great strategies and these great ways of targeting people, but if the message is wrong, or they're not even remembering what the message is, you're just wasting money throughout the entire journey.
To your point, then I'll turn back to you, Michael. How much seconds, or how many seconds do you think is necessary for an ad to be remembered? Is it a matter of the length of the video format, or the length of the format, or is it a matter of the frequency at which someone sees it for X amount of seconds? I mean, I know we're getting cerebral here, but it's very much how the media world operates. So, and you are really in the middle of it. That's the value proposition of your company.
Yeah,
so I'm turning to you.
So no, I'll carry the weight of the company on my shoulders. It's okay. I think I'll probably tie your 2 points together. I'll try at least, then you can judge me afterwards. On the creative and the effectiveness. And how long do you need for something to be effective? It's view time. It is about the creative, and it is about the objective and the campaign and what the purpose is. Because you could, if the objective is awareness and it's the top of the funnel, and you are this, a brand that's huge in the market, a Nike, a HSBC, you might just need somebody seeing a simple out-of-home ad, a gaming ad for a second and a half, and you've got your brand assets, and that will work to trigger recall. And usually a good threshold is, if you take away brand size, it's about 2 seconds for Facebook and digital and gaming. It's in that threshold for recall, but then again, it will decline over time. To make the bigger metrics move, like somebody choosing your brand over competitors, that's when you need a different strategy of attention. So now you don't need ads that deliver you a second or 2 seconds, or a creative that can deliver what it needs to deliver, a message of the brand within 2 seconds, but people keep viewing for 8 seconds. You now need to go, right, well, I only need 2 seconds, so why am I spending my money on a YouTube pre-roll that delivers me 6 when I don't need it? So efficiency is straight away of going, well, I can reduce my spend, I can put it in a different place, meet my objectives, and I'll have, instead of 1 6-second ad that delivers what I need, but then stops, I'll get 3 2-second ads, and I'll put them in-game, and I'll do one on a Wednesday and a Friday and a Sunday and spread it out. But there's these different thresholds of view time and attention that you need for different objectives. And you can sort of start, again, not putting things in silos, but if you know your strategy and what you need, you can work your way back to the whole plan, all the way down to the creative, and say, well, what is the creative going to deliver me versus what I need?
So, Fredrik, you have a lot of experience working, with media agencies, advertisers, looking at the entire mix, both offline, online.
Yeah.
How do you see the perhaps limitation of creative needs to fit the purpose of the media mix that sometimes advertising agencies provide? Like, do we need to absolutely be in every touch point? Or could we then, look into quality of the creative and not so much just be in every touch point where sometimes we don't need to be there?
I mean, I would say one challenge today, and that's also the exciting part, that it is fragmented and that there are so many options, is that you need to avoid the silos between the creative and the media. So you might have the creative agency, you might have an in-house team, you have media agencies, you have in-house teams, etc. To connect everything. Because just an example, I mean, we had some studies with a client that were able to then link their media spend and their frequency. So what's the number of exposures per person we reach? That will then trigger the memory or the effect that we want to achieve, which is often overlooked. You look at the media KPIs, what's the cost to reach a certain audience, and so on. The media agency working on that. But in fact, if you could ensure that you get the same output showing the ad 1 time or 2 times, break through the clutter, that's a massive saving. You could cut your budget by 30% if you want to reach 50% 1 time compared to 3 times. So you think that's an important area. That's harder today. And if I just can, a little bit of a pep talk to the group here as well. If you look at the evolution of media, I mean, your job within marketing and media is more important than it's ever been. Go back 20 years. I had this metaphor that I tried out earlier. Let's see if it works. But it was like playing the slot machine, and you won every time. So everyone got the same reach in media. Everyone could have massive attention and reach. Today, it's not so easy. You will not win every time. It's more like a poker game. You need to read the card. You need to read the opponents. But that's also why creative is still as important as it's always been. But media can also be a differentiator, where some will totally miss out, will have 80% waste in their campaign. Another one will be very efficient and can win in the market. Like for like creative. So I think that's the exciting part, and the importance of the group here working with media is more important than ever.
Yeah. Benji. On that note, we spoke backstage as well as we were discussing about creative media and the two being accountable when we evaluate the performance. You said something very interesting, and I think that would be great for the audience for you to expand upon it, the simplicity of it. So could you expand upon the simplicity of the work that needs to be done and how you provide this to your clients, for example? Do we need to be very specific in what we need to create, or could it be just that simple?
I think just with time, with technology, it also got easier for us to overcomplicate things. And I think that a lot of brands have forgotten the most important thing, the brand. We spend sometimes, I think brands are spending too much time at the bottom of the funnel, and they're in sales mode, sell. Let's try to find the cheapest click and the cheapest way to get to the customer. But really and truly, if you actually had to work all the way back up, the more energy you put into the brand, the cheaper it will come to the bottom, because people will actually come to you, right? So organic keywords, people actually searching for your brand as opposed to you going to them and shouting in their face, kind of like the billboard approach. I think it makes much more sense for brands to build a culture, to build a reason why they should come to you. It does take time, it does take energy, it's a different form of marketing, but it's something which you keep investing and it remains with you. While when you're at the bottom of the funnel, you keep spending, and when you stop the spending, it dies, while brand doesn't.
Further to the topic, because one of those things that's been a trendy word for a very long time is personalization. We spoke about it backstage again. What's your take on the personalization keyword that the industry has been using for the past, I would say, 10 years? Do you think that this has its value, or this is something that should be reconsidered slightly? Fredrik, maybe?
Yeah, I can start here. I would say, as you mentioned here, that the technology enables a lot of efficiencies to produce a lot of content. You know, like you can work with dynamic creation, and you can have formats, and you want to adapt the messages. But it's almost gone too far now. I would say that's what I see anyway, and I see a lot of advertisers in all categories that are really trying to find out the focus, what's working, what should we prioritize, instead of trying to have too personalized ads, which might also be offensive for the receiver. Oh, so are you tracking me? I mean, in that way. So it's a hard balance in that area. What we also see when we look at the overall, holistic view of the marketing budget. So if you create more content, more sizes of ads, messages, of course, you can do it in media without very much more costly implementation, but then you have the production costs, you have the creative, you have the time to analyze everything, etc. So I think, especially in tough times as now, recession, media prices it's a buyer's market again in media. So media inflation is slowing down. We're doing this quarterly inflation report. We see deflation in some markets. Everyone needs to be very careful on what they buy. So I think that's one area where you can, create efficiencies, streamline, simplicity, focus on what really works in a way. Yeah.
Talking about inflation, it makes me think about a new marketplace. I mean, yours, the in-game. Two topics maybe we can cover. Bounce on the personalization, and also on the effectiveness the new marketplace that you tap into can provide to the target audience, or the advertiser, rather.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what Michael touched on earlier is about reaching people for first to be viewed, and if an ad needs to be viewed to be effective. The second part is speaking in their language, in a way they understand, in an environment they're happy to be in. I think, like you've touched upon, like you don't want to feel like your privacy's been invaded for the sake of an advert. But I think if you can find a place where you can meet your audience, you don't find them, you meet them in a place they like to spend time in, that's the most nice and natural way. And I think on the new platforms part, I think, we represent a brand new platform. We have viewability metrics, attention metrics, all these things. But because it's new, people have run TV campaigns for decades. They don't know if you're in a new platform, you don't know what's the effectiveness of your spend now is in 5 or 10 years. But that's when you kind of have to tap into your marketing instincts. We're reaching the right people in the right space. We're speaking their language in an environment they enjoy spending time in. It must work. So there's some times where you have to follow your instincts and your marketing intuition to go, this is right, and if we do it first, we're going to have the biggest benefit, because if we wait 5 years, and all our competitors have been in that space because they've taken the plunge, it's going to be a lot more costly for you to join into that party at a later date. So it's, I think, be brave, but be calculated where you're brave.
And so far, given that you're coming from a real-world type of experience and now jumped into the virtual world, what's your take on this change in career for you, but also on how effectiveness is being measured?
100%. So in the sports sponsorship world, the partnerships world, measurement is frightening. Like, I would not be able to be in this room confidently with a room full of marketing managers and digital spenders, because it's so hard to measure and to track. Like, in a broadcast, a Premier League game, you'll get 5 million viewers around the world. Brilliant, great headline. How many are in Europe? 1 million. How many are in the UK? 500,000. How many are men? 400,000. How many between 18 and 35? 200,000. So it's kind of, there is a narrowing effect of, you might reach a load of people, but who are you actually reaching? Whereas now, to come into the in-game space, we work with Football Manager. They have 200,000 analytical men who love football that play Football Manager every month. They play 50 games on average every month. It's a huge amount of time. So we're reaching the same audience, but only that audience without the waste over the sides. So but the issue is it's unproven. Like, sponsorship is like, we have a 10 million a year that we're going to put into sponsorship because we always do. But it's interesting to be able to talk about the new platforms to complement traditional ones, because if you're not doing it, your competitors are, and by the time you find out, it might be too late. So it's been really interesting to switch over, and I much prefer dealing in tangible numbers than high fives and goals, as much as that was fun.
Yeah. So, Michael, We spoke about different marketplaces, offline, online being traditional publishers, but also game publishers. In the researches that you do at Lumen, do you see a difference of performance measured in effectiveness based on specific channels where creative is being amplified? Do you see better environments where ads could be placed to produce the effectiveness that every advertiser is looking for?
Yeah, massively. And just to add the extra point onto your filtering down of when you got there, you can get to your audience on somewhere like TV, but that doesn't mean that they're then in the room, and that doesn't mean that there isn't a device between them and the screen. Whereas when you go for something like gaming, there is not just personalized, there is a dedicated person behind that screen engaging in the content, and the ads are personalized as part of the content. So you don't just have the audience that you know are there and are engaged, but you've got that extra layer on top that maybe you don't need the personalization of these creatives. You've got the same effects from now it's contextual relevance. There's the extra points in there. But as I slowly recall your question that I diverged away from, the different platforms and the effectiveness, yes. So there is, I think that's one of the really interesting parts about buying media is where people stop. Because you really, whatever you do, you want to buy the outcome, but nobody is really knowing if they're buying the outcome or the metrics that they're using to predict if they're getting it. There's lots of error in there, and the creative is a huge part of that error. But you will see, and this is one of the challenges that is just in gaming, and it's across out of home and print and cinema, is aligning on the same metrics to measure in the same way as you can. It's difficult between online and offline, but especially for things that people use traditionally like TV, the amount of error that is in there, or even digital ads. I think about 70% of display ads that are technically viewable aren't viewed, and yet they're all in people's spend. And it's the out-of-home twists it a little bit to fit their own metrics of how do you say if something's viewable or not? So they change their metrics to say, well, everything's viewable. But then they need to work in as their next step, well, how do you measure the effectiveness? If everything's viewable all the time, then the only thing you've got is the reach and creative. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And gaming is probably a little bit ahead of everybody else. One, because it's online, but two, you know that these metrics, and you can link them straight from your spend to the audience, to the outcomes, with a creative in between. You can link everything together that you might, in simplistic terms, struggle to do with print or out of home, or even the cinema, which is not the easiest one to measure. But big differences, and I think gaming, in terms of adopting new and more accurate metrics in the measurement, is ahead of the game. Everybody eventually will get there, and then you'll be on the same level playing field again. But like you said, there's no point waiting 5 years for your audience to age or for your competitors to do the same thing. While there's an advantage now, there's efficiencies to be made. I think picking up new metrics like gaming is doing is it's going to be a massive benefit for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Do you want to jump?
Yeah,
on?
no, I can just add that what you're describing is also like a revival to context within media, to care more about where you appear, because media is, of course, you have the creative. What are we going to say? It's about communication. What are we going to say? Who are we going to say it to? That's kind of the reach and the frequency, but also where do we say it is increasingly important. I mean, in the old days, traditional media planning, before digital, before data, before all of that, we chose a car magazine if we want to sell a car, and that was number one, to reach the right audience. But what you might forget was they were also in the right mindset. They were, ready to receive a message. So we see a lot of that from our clients, working more on contextual targeting, of course, also using data when possible and so on, but caring about the context for attention, but also for hitting the right person at the right moment. It has huge impact.
As what we were sort of saying earlier, the amazing 3-word saying that I coined last night when we all went to dinner is told, not sold. So, and that ties into context, and people paying attention to advertising voluntary, the effects are 10 times than if you force something in front of someone, and that ties in to context, that tell someone something rather than selling, and that you can do it with the creative, but the placement and where you show it is all part of that story.
Yeah.
I know we didn't speak about this backstage, but I think that might be beneficial for the audience. How do you position, this conversation around the IAB's mission, which consists in enhancing the user experience? Basically, what the IAB has evaluated is that many people are being sold something, and as a result of this, they're blocking the ads. So what do you think, and where do you think the media industry is heading in regards to what it is that the IAB is trying to drive?
I mean, I'll let everybody else open up on it as well, but simplistically, it's better advertising. It's designing, there's lots of elements in there, but on the creative, it's designing creatives that people want to watch and that aren't forced on them. And creatives that aren't, it doesn't need 30 seconds for it to be effective. Presume that people will only view it for 4 seconds. And the majority, 80% of people, will see it for 2 seconds in a Facebook feed and keep going. And then a small minority of weird people who are in market or just strange have viewed it for an extra 10, and then a small amount viewed it for longer. But it will lead to better advertising and more concepts coming up, like instead of tracking people with cookies that we now move away from, the same effects can be seen if you prime people with, for example, gaming and out of home before they go to the cinema or before they see a TV ad. The same effects come in different packages. So I think with their changes will bring a better experience, probably more effective and better ads, and it will bring in a few new metrics, but new ideas in how we think about frequency and reach.
Fredrik, coming back to the IAB, I'm not sure if the audience understands what the IAB is, but it stands for the Interactive Advertising Bureau that regulates how media is being purchased based on the terms we've been using throughout this panel, that being viewability, number of seconds you see a video or a banner. And so what we're trying to do here is to push the ball further by introducing a new keyword that's being discussed in the media industry, that being attention, new marketplaces where this can be driven. But Fredrik, because you work with many advertisers and you audit many of them and also help them and consult on pitches, etc., how often does this question come up now recently, given the inflation conversations we had around offline, but also ways to measure the impact your ads can have with different marketplaces than just offline? So how often do you have these conversations with advertisers that you work with?
And I know that the kind of the global agency groups are driving these topics as well, because there is huge potential to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of media buy, and there's some KPIs and measurements that's been missing. So it's like, okay, you have all these algorithms, often programmed by the big media vendors, the global giants, and if you optimize on just reach and don't take attention into account, or if you don't look at the effectiveness, then the algorithms and optimization will be done based on that. So there's kind of a wide consensus, I would say, from the advertiser side, but also from media agencies, media owners, to add more metrics like attention and so on, because they don't see enough success cases. Okay, so we spent this budget, what was the outcome? And if your agency or your team can't answer that, then you need to find out what's missing in the data.
But it's not always possible to track everything. I think we're trying to over-track everything. So like we do a lot of advertising in the hotel industry. So we drive direct bookings as opposed to OTAs, but it's very hard to track, right? So if I'm looking for a hotel to come to Malta and Slema, my journey starts at booking.com. I start going through all the hotels. The picture is going to get me, so which picture is most that I want to visit. You open a new tab, you get different tabs. But then you might get busy and you might close it.
Yes.
And then 2 days later, you might go organically and you search, I remember that one, it was called something 19, and you searched on Google, so that's where you need to be prominent there. Yes. And then you get busy again and you cut. And then your wife calls you and says, I remember that. And then like 20 steps later, you make the booking, right? True. And it can actually be made off your son's iPad. So we're trying to over-track, I think, and it's at the end of the day, it's also a feeling. It's an overall feeling. And as marketeers, we need to have this like gut instinct where you have all the information and you need to keep on optimizing it. And sometimes I think we just get lost through the data.
Yeah, it's like the car industry. I mean, without changing topic, but the car industry is very much known to be inheritance from the parents. So if your family is always driven a Fiat, you will most likely also drive a Fiat. Yeah. So that's a different topic, but
but you're right.
We have 3 minutes left, and I would like to leave it open for questions. Does the audience have any questions to ask the panelists? No? Could we get a microphone, please?
Or I can speak loud.
Can speak loud. Maybe you can stand up if you don't mind. Yes.
Hello, Christopher from Strandus. I have a question. So, in your brands and with your customers, how is the performance with the adult traffic? Because, of course, all the platforms they share contextual. Of course, we know the sports is great for sports betting, but adult traffic, like itself, adult traffic itself is a good converting traffic, and if it is, what is the step overs, like, of course, animal pornography or like risk that also we can get if we go to that advertisement? Thank you.
I think, if you don't mind, repeat the question so that the entire audience can hear you, because I don't think that they could hear you.
Okay, so I was asking how is the performance with the adult traffic, and what are the risks or benefits that we can get as an operators or as an advertiser using this kind of traffic? I think I summarized it.
Yeah. Anyone wants to answer?
I would love to answer.
Yeah, go for it.
One of the things we have at Lumen is we have a panels of people who do passive eye tracking to measure their attention. We have a panel of 1,000 people in the US, 1,000 in the UK, soon to be Japan, not Russia anymore for obvious reasons. But what they do is they choose to turn on, when they're online and browsing, their webcam camera. So we won't see what's on their screen, but we'll know if there was an advert there and what page they were on. And one of the top 5 sites that always comes up across markets and audiences and demographics is Pornhub. And Pornhub is always there. It's always one of the most visited. Its attention it gets to ads is always fairly high because people spend an inordinate amount of time on Pornhub, taking in the advertising. And in terms of brand safety, we did a study with Imperial College London around Black Lives Matter and COVID at the same time, which was, in short, I know we're running out of time, was trying to see the effects of people advertising against blacklisted content, or essentially journalism you might want to read about war and about death, that's still good but doesn't then steal the money. And the effects of it don't apply to a brand, unless it's about an Audi car and there's an article and it's burned and it's killed everybody in the car and there's an Audi ad there. The effects on people's likelihood to view it, how long they'll view it for, the perceptions of the brand, the top funnel, bottom funnel, all remain the same if it's a good ad in the right place to the right audience. And so in theory it would apply to somewhere like an adult site, but what it will take is that first brand to take the risk that theory says isn't there. And I think I'm so enthusiastically bringing it up because we've already talked about this earlier, is that if you were Audi and you did appear on Pornhub, everybody would organically talk about you as well. So you would see in Facebook and on social media, well, Audi love this kind of porn. Or maybe they don't, but people would joke about it, and there would be an extra boost to it as well. So in theory, attention works the same way, so you can be just as effective and plan it and reduce your costs. It would be great for brand outcomes, and then there would be its own boost, a bit like priming and context, in terms of organic content that people produce. So 3 minutes of me passionately talking about content.
Good.
Let you
Do you have any more time for questions, or do you want to add something? Or
no.
Good. One more question, maybe? Yes? The microphone's coming.
It's not adult content.
It is not, no. it is important in paid media to target the right audience, but as a sensitive vertical, it is important for us to exclude a certain kind of audience as well. We don't want to appear for underage. We don't want to appear for people who has gambling problems, whatever. How do you manage this kind of problem?
Maybe that's one.
Yeah, I can only speak from my point of view, and for every different publisher, every different game we work with, we get audience statistics, so we know that 80% are over 18 per game, or 75 for this game, 90 for this game. For some games, when we get data from the actual gamers, they type in their age when they play the game. So for a betting company, we could make sure that ads are only targeted to people who are 18 and over. So there's an effective way of doing that through in-game, but also, yeah, specifically, but also as like an audience purchase on a title-by-title way.
Think we good? Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.